Hi, I'm Leah. So let's get started. Okay, there we can go ahead. My name is Leah from Dominican Republic. I am a clinical psychologist and I specialize in autism, both therapeutic intervention, educational intervention, and ABA. So first of all, I want to thank Christy for inviting me here to talk on autism Belize. I just hope that the information that we share today is helpful for some of you. Today we're going to be talking about shadow teachers or paraprofessionals. And let's start by that. What do we call them? So there are tons of names that we hear, and we've heard shadow teacher, paraprofessional, student aides, one-to-one assistant, support teacher, learning assistant. They're all okay. The most common names that we usually hear are shadow teacher and paraprofessional. So we might just use paraprofessional or parapro for today, but if you hear me swap for any of those terms, then know that it's all the same thing. Remember that if you have any questions, just let us know so that we can help you out. So let's start by defining what exactly is a paraprofessional. So the parapro is someone who offers services to a family and their child that has any type of learning difficulties or developmental difficulties that affect him or her in school. This person offers overall support in the school setting. This means that they're going to try for the child to participate and benefit from school time as much as possible. Everything from filling in the gaps between the child and the learning content, helping them be more successful, make friends, all of this is going to be part of their role. So we're going to take a look at their responsibilities a little bit later, but that's basically what the paraprofessional is. So the need for a shadow teacher is something that many people are yet to confused about, let's say. So the main purpose of why we need a parapro is the inclusion of children with learning difficulties in school settings. The inclusion of children that have different type of conditions, maybe disabilities such as autism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, many other things. Their inclusion to school settings should be a priority. And although not every child is ready for that challenge, because that is reality, there are children that definitely are, and that given the right opportunities, the right support, proper intervention, they will be successful. And also it's important to remember that inclusion of children in the school setting is beneficial not only to the children that present some type of developmental difficulty, but also to all children. But that's a whole other subject. We're not going to go down that road, but just wanted to say that part. So when we need a shadow teacher is when the child being included needs support in the classroom that the teacher or the normal team at school cannot provide. When does this happen? Well, normally we have a teacher, sometimes we even have a teacher and a teacher assistant in the classroom, and many parents, ask me, so why can't the assistant just give him a little extra support? So the thing is that every child has specific needs, individual needs. It is impossible to think that all children in one classroom are going to learn at the same rate, are going to do the same things, are going to benefit from the same type of activities, or need the same level of attention. Every child, not because they are on the spectrum or because they have any difficulties, just because as a human being, they will have different needs. This makes the job of both the teacher and even the assistants that might be in the classroom a challenge. They have to dedicate a lot of time to all the children. So when you have a child in the classroom that needs something beyond that, it is a good idea to take a look at what could be the scenario and if they really would benefit more of having a paraprofessional with them that can actually focus on their individual needs so that the time in school is more successful. If not, we risk the children like flying under the radar and not really benefiting from time in school, regardless of the effort that the staff might be putting into it. So when we talk about children with diverse learning needs, we need to consider if the parapro is a necessity, because our goal is to provide for all students the opportunity to participate to their maximum extent that they can do that. So what we want is to have active learners that will take time, but we want to achieve that goal. We do not want them to persistently be passive learners or parallel learners that are just there observing. We want them to actually take part of what's going on in the classroom and benefit from that. And that might mean a little extra support. Some schools use pullouts, and this is a good way of taking advantage of school time. If that happens, it is very likely that you need a parapro as well. So pullouts are moments where the child is pulled out of the classroom to work one-on-one with a professional and focus on individual objectives that will benefit him or her more than what is going on in the classroom. So for example, if you have a child that is working on let's say basic numbers, and at this time he is not benefiting from an activity where the children are having, let's say, a competition on division or multiplying or something, and both the teacher and the parapro decide that the child would not benefit from this activity, then, well, let's just take this time and go outside and do a pullout and work on individual objectives that will really help him. So if you think about it, it is very hard to consider the teacher or even the assistant having time to offer this type of individual attention and time to every child that needs it. So in general, these are some scenarios where you could talk about a child needing a paraprofessional. But more specifically, let's go into what are the needs or what are the abilities that a child needs to have to be successful in school. So many people talk about school readiness skills, which normally is targeted around preschool time, and that is where we try to focus on having kids develop social skills, emotional maturity, independence, physical health, coordination, cognitive skills, language skills. And we take a look at all of this when we decide if a child is school ready. Now, when we are talking about a child that might be on the spectrum or have another type of condition, this child might not develop those abilities at the rate of a neurodevelopmental child. So when we have that scenario, we have to pay attention to what skills they have and how will that translate into the classroom. So for example, if you have a child that cannot follow group instructions, this will be important and significant within the classroom setting. If you have a child that does not grasp the academic content for the grade that he or she is supposed to be in, that is important to take into account. If the child cannot stay seated for X amount of time, that is also a barrier that will be significant within the classroom setting. So we take a look at all of these and decide if this person or this child needs that extra support. Most commonly, the children that are suggested to have a paraprofessional go with them to school are children with learning difficulties, behavior difficulties, physical challenges, developmental difficulties, and autism and other neurodevelopmental conditions. So the part about whether they need it or not and what type of school setting is one of the biggest issues that parents go through. And it's normally deciding between what are my options for education. So maybe there's specialized education, and that's one option. And then there's mainstream education, and that's another option. Now, choosing between one or the other is really a decision that has to be made case by case. So assessments are needed, and you need to talk to professionals and the family and the school, and it has to really be a multidisciplinary assessment in order to decide what is best for that child specifically. But what the other point is that we have the idea of having mainstream education with support, which would be going to a mainstream school with a parapro, and then we can find the best of both worlds for children that can benefit from that. And there definitely are children that, for the time being, are better off staying in a specialized scenario, but that will depend on each child. If the case is that we have a child that would benefit more from being on a mainstream education, we have to use teachers, professionals, therapists, family to decide. What are we going to look at? We're going to look at things like, what are the things that the child can do independently? What things can they achieve if we adapt or modify the classroom curriculum? Maybe there are things that they can't do exactly as, but that they could do it with simple changes. What could they do with peer assistance? That is a great part of inclusion, having other children motivate and help and support children that are falling behind a little bit or that need a little extra help. What can they do if they have individual one-on-one support? And then when we answer these type of questions, we can come down to the decision if maybe a paraprofessional should be assigned to modify and adapt and support the child in the classroom to assure that they'll have success. And it's a way of providing individualized support in a least restrictive environment, which is in some cases the best scenario. So, who decides if a paraprofessional is needed for a child? So this depends a lot on where you live, as well as many other of the things that we're going to talk about. So in general, let's just get this out of the way. In the United States, Canada, and many other countries, they have a very structured, systematic approach to deciding what type of services each child needs based on their assessments and their age and other criteria. Now, that is one way of how it happens. I'm not going to say that it's better or worse. It's just a different way of how it happens. And in other countries, such as Dominican Republic and Belize and other countries in the world, it is more of a private process. So it is normally up to the school, the parents, to find professionals to hire this person that's going to be a parapro. So it's a very different process. We are not going to target the types of systems where government entities take charge. We're going to focus on countries where this type of decision and this type of service is more private, and it's up to family and school, along with professionals, to find and make this happen. So the thing is that we have three people or three teams that have to chip in order to make a good call on what's going to happen. First of all, there's the school. The school needs to be honest and have an open conversation about what their possibilities are, what can they offer, talk about what their limitations are, or even their concerns, because sometimes we have schools that would like to be inclusive, but are afraid that they're not prepared or that they lack some or other skill. So that is a very important conversation to have, so that we can get to the bottom of, is it something fixable or is it something that closes the door? Then there's parents. Parents are the ones that make the final call on what they want to do with their child. So informing the family, and then the family knowing and deciding if they are more comfortable with their child having or not having a parapro is important. But it's also important for them to listen to what professionals have to say, because they have a reason for suggesting what they did. Then there's the professional part, the clinicians, the psychologists, the case coordinator, whoever is working with you and is helping you make these calls. Have a conversation, talk about why this is being suggested, what the best scenario could be, and come to a decision based on what these three people or persons have to say. So sometimes the family goes into the school already having a shadow teacher with them, but sometimes they don't, and it's a school that requires it. Either way, or even if it's the clinical team, the therapists that suggest that this is a need, these are all possibilities of how it starts. But the middle ground should be that no matter who is the first person to suggest it, it should be a three-way decision. Then another question that is asked a lot is, how do I hire a paraprofessional? Like, where do I find this person and what do I do? So again, keep in mind that this is focused on the private way of doing it. Who hires is either the school or the family. Sometimes I've seen schools and families that come to an agreement and they split the costs. Sometimes the family hires a person and they pay them a salary for their services. Other times the school is the one that hires the person and either charges the family an additional fee for this individualized service, or they just have it as part of their school program and they have different parapros that offer services and support different children within the school. Either of this, any of this is fine. So if the school that you're going to already offers the paraprofessional, you don't have to worry about hiring. Now, if you are a family concerned about how to find or how to hire a parapro, this is what I would suggest to do. So first of all, keep in mind that depending on who is hiring and what the policies in place are, communication guidelines will vary greatly. So, for example, there are families that they hire the paraprofessional and the parapro communicates directly with the family and gives them feedback on a daily basis, and the family is in charge of what is going on and have total access to what is happening with their child. Now, there are other cases where the school has a policy that the parapro cannot communicate with the family directly, and there's a school to family communication instead of an open communication. It might be okay. That the only thing I would say is that all of this should be discussed and decided before starting the school year or the process to make sure that everyone is comfortable with what communication is going to be and avoid future difficulties. Now, who can be a paraprofessional? That is another big question. So the thing is, there isn't really a career that you specialize in being a parapro. What normally happens is that depending on the country, there are requisites that need to be in place or qualifications. In our country, at least, and many other countries, there aren't specifics on what this person needs to be doing. Now, keep in mind that the parapro does not work on their own. So they work under the strict supervision of your specialist, your inclusion specialist, who is the person that will create the child's program and tell them what to do and supervise that they're doing this correctly. Also, they're working hand by hand with the classroom teacher and in a very controlled environment that is the school setting where you have teachers and school psychologists and a director. So there is not that much pressure or responsibility to what they're doing, in the sense of they're not the ones making calls. At the end of the day, they're really just following through with what has been decided by other specialists. So considering that, I would suggest that you don't really need a specialist to have a paraprofessional with your child. You can be a bit more open and find someone with general background in education or psychology, maybe a grad student or someone that recently graduated or someone who's just still finding their way on what they want to do. So many families do that. They just find a student and a college student, of course, and they offer them this practice and experience. So it is a great experience for someone starting in the area to work alongside professionals and school teams where they will be trained, they will be supervised, they will be constantly learning, they will be collaborating in a team of people that are probably a bit more experienced. So for anyone starting in the area, this is a great opportunity to learn and to build their professional experience. So that is one thing that you can offer as a family when you approach someone to offer the opportunity or the job itself. So what should you focus on when looking for this person? The basics of when you're looking for someone to work with children. You need someone that's really good with children, someone that is positive and encouraging, that have that kind of attitude and that likes a challenge. Because anyone who works with kids or that has kids knows that nothing goes as planned. That is kind of a law. And you need to have a very positive attitude to accept these challenges and grow from them instead of getting stuck when you had this plan and today the child came in and they weren't being cooperative or a new behavior just popped up and I have no idea what to do with it. These can't be things that stop the work or that bum you. They need to be something that will motivate you to keep learning and to grow. So that is a great thing to look for in a parapro. You also need someone who's a real team player because working with inclusion in the school setting will imply working alongside teachers, many teachers probably, working with the school psychologist, with the therapists that work with the child, that might need a couple, with the case coordinator, with the family, and the parapro needs to have great communication and be able to handle these scenarios and work and collaborate with all of them. So they need to be comfortable and they need to have good communication skills. There's also the desire to learn, the willingness to study and to be guided and supervised because there, as I said, there isn't a parapro course per se that they will be taking, but they will be receiving training and follow up with professionals in the area. And it needs to be someone that looks at feedback as an opportunity to grow and not feel attacked or react negatively when they are given suggestions. So those are some of the general things to look for when you're finding a person. And one suggestion that I would give is having the specialist that you're working with, your case coordinator, psychologist, whoever you're collaborating with to make these calls, have them help you interview and select the person. So you as a parent will interview hopefully many people to have options and bring it down to maybe 2 or 3 that are your candidates of choice, and then have the psychologist interview them and give you their feedbacks. First of all, because they're going to have a different view of the person. They're going to be looking at something else entirely as a professional, but also because they're going to be working alongside. So it is important to get that feedback on what they think and how they feel. So that's something that could help make a better decision on choosing the person. I would also suggest having a contract. When things are clear from the start, everything is a lot easier to handle and you can avoid issues along the line. So having a contract that specifies what the role is, responsibilities, and details that go up to things like what happens when there's no school. So if there's a holiday, does the parapro have to go to work or do they stay home? Or do they have to go to the child's home and work with them from home that day? Anything is possible. It's just important to look at these things and make a call at the beginning and have that very clear in writing so that there's no confusion moving forward. And another, but very important thing, is that you will need to train this person and there will need to be some ongoing supervision, monthly at least, I would say. Those are 2 very important things. So let's take a look at those and what it could look like. So when we talk about training, it is very important for the specialists in your child's team to train this person that's going to be their shadow teacher or parapro, so that they can take charge of the child's program in school. So first of all, even though the specialist, the whoever is taking charge of the case, whether it's the case manager or psychologist, they are going to assess the child and they're going to have that evaluation. But I would suggest that the school team also have like a little checklist of things that they observed during the beginning of the school year, and then reassess often so that they can have some information as to how the child is moving along and how things are progressing. I think it's important for the training to be, yes, somewhat in, let's say, theory at the beginning. So if you're working with a child with autism, you must be trained in the spectrum and what is this and what does it look like and what are best practices and everything related to autism and the condition that you are working with. Also, better strategies, behavior management, anything that implies on the best way to do things when you are working with a child. Then there's a part of the practice. So the individual needs of this child and what his specific programs look like and what strategies work best for him. So this is the part that will be ongoing, because maybe at the beginning of the school year, they were implementing a type of program that was working perfectly, and then it stopped working, and you have to learn a totally different way of presenting this program. So it will definitely be ongoing. The ideal time frame for supervisions and follow-ups will definitely depend on the child's needs, on what the team suggests, but it is important to have regular meetings and to keep track of what is happening and the progress that is going on. So you need to review the progress that has been with data, that we're going to take a look at data a little bit later. You need to listen to concerns about what is going on in school, take a look at what's happening in the classroom, what difficulties are presenting, and how can we improve them, and decide on changes that you need to make moving forward. So all of this implies that there needs to definitely be maybe a monthly, but that's up to the team to decide. An idea of a supervision plan that I can share with you would be the following. So you could have the teacher and the parapro meet once a week to review a lesson plan, to decide on objectives and materials that you're going to work on next week, and have everything set. Good communication, working as a team, once a week, that could be a good frequency. Now, the school team needs to meet. This involves whoever, depending on what type of team the school has. Some have psychologists, others have coordinators. Whoever is involved with the case and has something to do with it should have a monthly meeting, bi-monthly if it's too much, to discuss the case. Again, review progress, decide on changes, etc. The paraprofessional should meet with his or her supervisor, in this case, the inclusion specialist or the psychologist or the case coordinator that is providing the IEP and the training. They should meet at least once a month is what I would suggest. Bi-weekly would be great. I guess this would depend, again, on the needs of the child. Maybe start with bi-weekly meetings and then move towards monthly as things get easier. But definite meetings to review the content that has been worked on, to review how the parapro is implementing the program prepared, how they're taking data, what is going on with behavior, with learning, all of this, and suggest what needs to stay the same or change for the next month. Then the parapro should definitely visit the child's therapy sessions. I would suggest at least once a month to collaborate with therapists that work with the child as well, and set similar strategies, talk about what could change in the school setting or the therapy settings. Share that collaboration makes a big difference in what everyone does and how this translates into a more cohesive type of intervention for the child. Also, having the supervisor, the case coordinator, the psychologist visit the school once every 2 or 3 months, again, depending on everyone's agreement, where they can do a direct supervision in the classroom to see the child and how they're working, and meet with the school team and review the IEP, the objectives, etc. All of this will happen more often or less often, depending on needs. Sometimes there might be a new behavior showing up that's causing some trouble, and maybe the supervisor will have to come in a couple of times in 1 month to follow up. Or maybe next month everything was very relaxed and there was no meeting. It will depend on many factors, but the ideal would be to have systematic meetings that will help follow through with everything. Now, regularly, this type of team includes the case coordinator, who's the specialist, right? So this person meets with the parents and meets with the school directors or coordinator, whoever's in charge, and the three of them will make decisions, will come up with ideas, and decide moving forward what's going to happen, thinking about the big picture. So you also have the teacher, who plans for the classroom and then works with the parapro in collaboration to follow through with the IP and everything. Therapists that see the child outside are part of the team. They will probably be less involved with what happens in the school, but definitely should have some type of communication. So let's take a look at what some of the responsibilities are for the person working as a shadow teacher. Remember that, of course, this depends on the agreement made with the family, made with the school, and on the needs of every child. But here are some of the general guidelines that apply to most cases. First of all, you need to work to not be needed in the future. So this must be your goal. As a parapro, you need to try and make your child as independent as possible so that you can leave and not be needed as soon as possible. You need to provide instructional support, provide one-to-one instruction to the child in the classroom, modify academic content based on the IEP, create materials, implement the behavior plans that the specialist has prepared, provide personal care assistance. Some children need help going to the bathroom or eating, and there's the support that they need there too. You need to promote inclusion, friends, independence, learning, paying attention, all of this that will just happen on a daily basis. Collect data, tons of data, and we'll see that later. Prepare reports as needed, and meet and collaborate with the whole team, communicate with the child's family. All of this is just a general idea of what exactly they would do. The most important thing is that they work in collaboration with the teacher. So in order to maintain effective communication with the teacher, the parents, everything, we need to work together. We need to use strategies. We need to use similar strategies across different settings, meaning therapy, home, school, so that there is consistency for the child and so that we can see a better progress. Then when parapros are given the opportunity to communicate more and participate and share their opinions, there are definitely better results in general for the child because the parapro spends a lot of time with that child. And so they have sometimes little details that another part of the team might not know that are usually very helpful. And when they feel empowered, they normally give their best, as most people do. So one of the suggestions I would give is to not leave the parapro behind just because maybe they have less experience than another professional on the team. That would be important to take into consideration. It is very important for the teacher and the parapro to implement reflective practice. So this would just mean taking the time in those weekly meetings that they have, where they can talk about what's working, what isn't working, can the student participate independently in this type of activity, is he still needing too much help, is there another student that can provide support with this goal, or maybe am I supporting him too much, is he ready for a bit more independence and I'm hovering and still giving them too much help. So this is some reflection that also helps to guide what the intervention is going to look like, and it needs for both the teacher and the parapro to be involved in that process. Many of the people that work in these teams also have kind of a difficulty identifying who's responsible for what. And that, again, depends on many factors, especially school policies. But it's important to keep that in mind and have it clear from the start. So what is the teacher's role and what is the parapro's role? Some parents fear that if their child has a paraprofessional with them, the teacher won't be involved in their child's education, and that they'll kind of look the other way and leave it to the parapro to educate their child. And that should not be the case, definitely. So a great way to avoid this is to define from the beginning what their roles and responsibilities are in different aspects. So for example, when it comes to planning, the teacher plans for the weekly lesson plan, the monthly objectives, while the parapro will adapt this plan to make it suitable for their child and independently. Sometimes we have a parapro that works with more than one child, and I'm very sorry. So for each of these, it's important to keep in mind who does what, including the teaching. For the teacher to teach the lesson to the whole group, the parapro will have to support their individual child in keeping focus, following through, maybe translating the instructions in lesser words to help them follow through. In behavior management, who takes the lead? The behavior specialist is the one who normally defines the behavior modification plan, but who takes the lead to handle behaviors in the classroom? Also, for example, setting objectives, who is going to decide what the child is going to learn? Are you going to do this together? All of this is important to define at the beginning. Another important part of all of this is observation and data collection. Many teachers are normally afraid of data when we ask for this, but really after you start, it is not that hard or intimidating. Data is basically recollecting information of what's happening. This is what's going to let us know if a child is really acquiring new skills. Data will let the team know if they're learning, if our objectives are being met. It serves as a permanent record for the future when we want to go back and take a look at different patterns in learning or in behavior. It is just so helpful, and without it, we are at risk of reporting inaccurately based on our personal or professional subjectives of what's my opinion, what I think. Oh, he's doing great. He's communicating more. Well, that's wonderful, but what does that mean? How many words is he using? That sort of thing. So when we use data, it can be made very simple and user-friendly, so that is not a lot of work for the person taking it. We can use checklists, which simplify it so much, and you just have to check. We can use anecdotal records for some people that just find it better to have a chance to openly jot down what happened. And we can have frequency or duration data where we're just looking at specifically, okay, we want to take data of how long the child sat for in the classroom today. So frequency can be just jotting like little sticks, how many times it happened, or duration where I will just set a timer every time he sits down so that I can see how long he was seated for. It'll depend on the needs and what we're actually looking for, but taking data is so important. Something that I find helps is having a traveling binder where everyone can take a look at what happened. So for example, during the school day, the parapro jots down the data of what happened, and then the binder travels to the house where family can take a look and even make notes. Oh, he didn't have his afternoon nap today, this happened, whatever. And then it goes to the therapist when the therapist sees the child the afternoon, and they can make any notes and take a look at what's happening in school. And so everyone has one place to communicate and place information, which tends to be super, super helpful. A suggestion that I would make would be to work with prompt fading and airless teaching. Now, this is up to the team, especially the psychologist that is working with the child and the school. But using airless teaching is a great way of focusing on children that don't respond to traditional methods so much, where, to give an example, if I am doing airless teaching to identify number 5, for example, I am going to show the child number 5, and I'm going to show them, oh, what number is this? And the child is going to say 3, 4, and then you're going to correct, no, this is number 5. And next time you ask them, what number is this? They will remember number 3, number 4, and number 5. So they'll be wondering in their head with all this information, which one of these is the correct answer. And this is what normally happens in traditional teaching methods. And I'm not saying it's bad or that it's wrong. Just that when you're working with a child that needs a little bit more support in their learning process, doing it in a more structured manner, like airless teaching, could be helpful. So the other part, airless teaching, would look like this. You would, from the first time that you show the number to the child, you would give them the answer ahead. So, for example, this is number 5. Can you say 5? 5. What number is this? 5. So now he's already repeated 5. There's a higher chance that the next time you ask them, they'll remember number 5. They won't have a bunch of numbers going through in their head, scrolling to see what the correct answer is. They will most likely only be connecting this to number 5. So you slowly go from physical or from full helps as giving them the answer ahead to slowly going back and less help until the child will respond independently. And then he knows the answer, and in the future he will know what number 5 is. The end result is the same. The difference is how we initially present it. This normally reduces the amount of time a child takes to learn a new objective or a new concept, and I find it very helpful. So when you use this, the important thing is to go from a lot of support to less support, which is what we normally call prompt fading. Prompts are just help. So we can go from being full physical in supporting the child, like, for example, holding their hands when they're writing. And I can do hand in hand to help them write number 5. And then I'm going to reduce my physical help by just holding their wrists. And then maybe I'll be modeling. I write number 5 and now you do the same. And then I'll go to gestural help or verbal prompts, like remember to hold your pencil tightly. And eventually we can fade all of this help and have the child work independently. This is, of course, up to the professionals in the team, but very, very helpful in the school settings, I find. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about confidentiality. When a child has professionals and different adults in their life, there will be people talking about him or her. It will be needed. But in that process, confidentiality has to be a very big part of the everyday life and how things are handled, how conversations are taken. So it's important to have this talk before you start working with someone new, and talk about how they need to consider the student's rights, their data privacy, respect towards the person, towards their condition or disability. So we handle, as professionals and teachers, a lot of delicate information like results of assessments, of medical assessments and psychological assessments. We handle academic progress, family circumstances and family relationships, and things that happen at home that maybe the family had to tell us because it affects the child somehow. This is all very delicate, and we need to be very respectful of this. So it is important to have this conversation with the parapro at the start. And one important thing is, for example, ask yourself, if this is not your child, ask yourself, if this were your child, how would you like this delicate information to be handled? Because sometimes we do have to have those conversations that are not so comfortable, but there is always a better way to deal with it. So how would you like this handled if it were your child? What would you like said about your child if it was yours and those were his teachers? What information would you like being discussed about you and your family and in the schoolyard? So that is very, very important. And only staff that needs to know information should be informed. Even though someone works at the school, if they are not directly related and in the team and needs to know specific information about a child, you just should not say it. And that is a good rule of thumb for everyone to follow. So some suggestions are, for example, avoiding using the name of the child if you are talking to someone about what you do. Suggesting to talk to someone else if someone asks you a delicate question or private information about the child you work with. Refer them to ask the principal or the teacher or someone who's actually allowed to, and they can decide what to do with this. You can also, when talking about a student, look for a private place, because you might be talking to mom, but if you're doing so in the yard and there are other children or adults there that can listen, you're not really respecting the child's privacy. So there are some conversations that are better to find a classroom or some private place where you can have that talk, even if it's with someone that needs to know it. No matter who asks you a question, if you are in doubt as to, is this okay for me to share or not? If you're doubting it, it's most likely that you shouldn't share it. So just try to hand it over to someone in charge, or just say that you don't know or can't answer. There are gentle and polite ways of doing so depending the situation. There is always an exception to every rule. For mental health purposes, everyone needs to vent. So we get it. Sometimes you need to talk to a friend and just let them know that you had a bad day and that something happened that day. You can do so, definitely. Just be mindful of how you say it. Try not to give details or information. Don't use the child's name or their family's name. Just to be very respectful and confidential about what is happening and the type of information that you are handling and delivering. Some parents ask about the cons of having a parapro, like what's the worst thing or what's the negative side. Some parents fear that their child will forever be dependent on other people if they have a parapro, which, if done correctly, will not be the case because we are working towards independence. Some parents are afraid that their child will be labeled or singled out or bullied, and all of this is important to address with your team and with the school, because it shouldn't happen, and having a parapro should not reflect this type of behavior. But if you have those concerns, talk to the professionals in the team and have them help you. Other parents fear that their child won't socialize or won't have friends because they have an adult with them. One of the advices that I tend to give is to have the parapro blend in. We know that this professional is here for this child, but if, for example, there's a type of uniform that the teachers wear, have the parapro wear that. And the parapro can definitely gravitate and support other kids as well, as a way of not being so black and white of, oh, I'm here specifically for Timmy. So those are things that can be handled, and solutions can be found if those are some of your concerns. In general, having a parapro work in the team has benefits for everyone. So for the students, obviously, he's the most benefited one. They have support. They have an opportunity to access information and education. They have help to be more successful in the school. They're learning to build on their strengths and not their weaknesses. There's so much positive for the child when they have someone to support them. For the school, it is also beneficial because they are being a part of a collaborative team that is going to be working towards the same goal, and that is always good for everyone involved. They're also going to have someone supporting their efforts to be inclusive, and the teacher's job is made very much, I mean, not easier, but at least more manageable when they have someone to help them distribute their time and their efforts in the classroom. And parents, I find that it facilitates the process of finding a school. When you're looking for a private school and you're afraid of being rejected, having a parapro and having a team with you will definitely open some more doors when you're looking for a school. Having daily communication with someone that's with your child and having that open communication is very helpful for most parents, because obviously schools have different types of rules and policies, and you don't necessarily have contact with your teacher so often. But when you have a parapro, you will have access to that daily feedback. And it also gives them a better sense of control of what's going on with their child and even their safety. So I find that parents, after they already have it, they feel a lot more comfortable and happy with the school experience. So in general, summarizing, here are some of the suggestions that I would give to anyone starting this process. Try to have an initial evaluation and assess often during the school year so that your decisions on what type of intervention is taking place will be based on data. So suggestion number 2, take data, take lots of data. Take behavior data, take data of what the child is doing or learning. Ask for help. Talk to other professionals who work with the child, share your methods of intervention, what works, what doesn't work. The more you collaborate and share, the more the child will progress. That is for sure. When you have something that works for you in your area, share it with the others. They might find it very helpful. Focus on increasing their independence and reducing their negative behaviors. If you do this, if you achieve that at least, even if your child still has learning difficulties, his or her success will be much greater once they are able to follow instructions, to be independent, to follow rules, to self-regulate. So try to focus on those core skills and the rest will follow, so to speak. Promote your child's relationship with his peers. That is extremely important, and you are definitely a great asset to doing that. Translate between him and other adults in the school so that it's easier for him to understand others and for others to understand him. Make the class teacher your partner and collaborate whenever you can, as much as you can. It will make all the difference in the world. Make changes to your intervention often, looking at the results from the data, and try to innovate, be creative. The more the better. Communicate often and effectively with everyone in the team. And remember that the main goal for a parapro is to not be needed. So just keep that in mind. Okay, well, thank you. This is basically all I have for today. If you have any questions, anything that I might help you with, we are here. So let Christy know and she can help you out with that. Thank you for everything.